standing at the border of what we used to know. 5 points in the darkness make a different kind of show. They say we're better together, but what do they know when the stars align differently down here below? And maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. Remember all the stories that your granddad told about a republic that wouldn't be controlled. Now the suits in the city say we've all been sold, but there's a fire burning that just won't get old. And maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. They draw their lines on paper, we draw ours in the sand. Some dreams are getting closer, while some don't understand. Don't understand. The highways stretch forever toward a setting sun, where cattle graze on memories of battles won. They say unity's the answer, but maybe we're done with playing by the rules of the chosen ones. Oh, maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. Maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. Our own sky. Our own sky.
Well, good evening, friends. It is time for a late night coffee talk, and I'm so glad to be here with you. You want to talk about screeching in here at the last second? That is exactly what happened. As you can tell, I'm a bit dressed down for tonight, so that ought to tell you that I was doing something. I'll talk about that here in a minute. Anyway. Hey, thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight and week after week. I really do appreciate it. I got my cup of coffee, And I am here to talk about things and answer questions. And so, with that, for all of you joining us for the first time, let me go ahead and give you your late night coffee talk orientation. As I have said, this is late night coffee talk. This is that time where once a week I take an opportunity to take a break from what I'm doing, jump in here and fire up the camera and the microphone. And you know what I'm doing is Texas independence, right? Working for Texas independence. Although today, doing something in the community was kind of cool. I enjoyed it. But that being said, I take a break. I answer your questions, talk about what's going on and with Texas independence and Texas politics. And honestly, you guys can ask me anything. You do week after week. So that being said, let me go ahead and tell you how to submit your questions. First and foremost, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can drop your questions in the chat, whether it's the TNM YouTube channel or mine. Additionally, if you're while you're there, like, subscribe, share, do all those cool things, and get you a channel membership while you're at it. I'll be thanking our channel members here in just a second. But if you're not watching there, you're watching on Facebook, one of the places we're broadcasting on Facebook, be sure to drop your questions in the comments. And while you're there, like and share as well. And of course, if you're on X, just drop it in the comments there on the chat, and be sure to, follow us and do all those cool things. Additionally, there's the address. Oh, I missed it. Anyway, so the email address, if you'd like to, you don't want to do any of that, you don't want to just kind of out your question, you can always email it to coffeetalk@thetnm.org, and you will see it. It scrolls down here. It'll be back around here pretty soon, right? You'll see it right down here. And if you're watching on Rumble, thank you for watching over there. We're still trying to figure out if they're ever going to implement the integrated chat over there. Oh, there's the address right there, coffeetalk@thetnm.org. Anyway, we're going to see if they get that done. And, until then, we just have to interact in that way. Just drop us an email, but, we'll figure something out. They'll get to it eventually. They finally got us the persistent stream keys that we asked for like 2 years. So I'm sure they're developing like crazy over there. Anyway, as I was saying, look, I just got back in. I am dressed down. I'm in like outside work clothes. I had to go help out at a community event. Our church is having a festival this weekend. And so I got to get out there and do something that did not involve speaking or teaching or dealing with politicians or, all of those things. Technology, didn't have to deal with that at all. I mean, it was a thing, and I rather enjoyed it. But Karen and I went, volunteered over there to help them get ready. It is a festival that's been going on for quite some time for a church that's been in our community for, I think I was told today, 127 years. That's a lot of years. So anyway, got to go do that and just was able to get back in here just in enough time and with a big pile of work I got to do tonight, but no big deal there. Guys, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. You guys have submitted a ton of questions already, and via email. You guys are getting ahead of the curve on this one. You're starting to send in your questions via email, which I really do appreciate, because if it's something that I have to go find the answer to, it gives me a little time to research. And so thankfully, none of the emailed questions tonight required a ton of research, but man, we're here. We got a lot of questions. But before I get started, I have to talk about the Texas legislature. I had my meeting with Daphne Armour this morning. And we got to, just as part of the meeting, talking about some of the things that she's working on. That would I just saw that in the chat. I'm not gonna look. I'm gonna look over here. I don't want to see that. Anyway, we're talking about the legislature, and I told her that I had been working on. I originally wanted to write this. Excuse me. I originally wanted to write this as like an opinion piece for the Texian Partisan, which, by the way, if you're not checking Texian Partisan every day or just digging through the archives, you need to do that. I want to write it as an opinion piece, but it's a lot to take in. I mean, there's a couple. I've got a couple of unfinished ones, but I don't know that I'm gonna write it, because I think I'm just gonna talk about it tonight, and maybe we'll do a podcast episode. I don't know, but really, kind of the sorry state of the Texas legislature, and I think maybe a lot of that conversation I had with Daphne this morning dealt with the reasons that I ranted so hard last week, and apologies if I for anyone out there, if you think I went too hard, I apologize that you are a snowflake, because I don't know that I could have gone any less hard on what we saw happen with the gold and silver transactional gold bill. I don't know that I could have softened it anymore, because at the moment we stop calling out things that are just, really harmful and detrimental. I mean, I'm not gonna go so far as to call it evil, what it was, because there is true evil out there. But I will say what it is. It's cowardice, right? I'm not going to repeat the rant, but that really informed a lot of it. And this opinion piece that I'm writing, the reason I've kind of wrestled with it is because I don't, I got chastised a bit for going hard on some of our people. And if nothing else, I do take feedback. I mean, I listen. I'm not right 100% of the time, but I got chastised for being a bit of a hard butt. Maybe you guys want me to be more of a hard butt. I don't know. But the bottom line is that, there are just some hard lines, right? There's just some non-negotiables that are out there. And at the first time you compromise on what was previously a non-negotiable, then every bedrock principle is up for discussion, right? I mean, that's just how these people behave. And so when you let them slide here on a bedrock, and don't get me wrong, I understand, there are things that you have to do out of pragmatism. There are some things like that, but compromising fundamental principles, there's really no excuse for that. So as I started writing this op-ed, the reason that I wanted to write it was because you have to understand, I understand what's happening right now. I understand what the political establishment is doing, and they are succeeding, but they're not succeeding because they hold all the cards. Because, right, elections come up, right, and people say, "Oh, all you ever say is just go out there and replace them and vote hard." Well, yeah, that's kind of the way the thing works. But you have an opportunity when you send me an email in the middle of a legislative session, say, "How do we throw this guy out of office? How do we replace so and so?" Well, your opportunity to do that was back at the primaries, the previous primaries or the general election, and your next opportunity is coming up. But if you didn't do what you had to do back then, as we used to tell the kids when they were little, you get what you get. You don't throw a fit, and I'm not here to judge people's level of activity, but there are signs, right? I don't have to read tea leaves to be able to see what's right in front of my face. If you, I'm not even going to get into that. But anyway, all that is to say, I understand what the strategy is for the establishment, and their strategy is really to break your spirit, right? So whether you're a TNMer, right, whether you're a Texiteer, whether you're maybe on the more kind of conservative side of the spectrum, whatever it is, regardless of what it is, their goal right now is to break your spirit. They're going as hard in the paint as they possibly can, doing the most outrageous in your face things that you really can't do anything about, in the hopes that they will break your spirit. you know, it's like I was telling Daphne this morning. Their strategy is summed up as the 2D strategy. You know, everybody always jokes about Trump and his 4D chess and all that stuff. Well, these guys have a 2D strategy, and their 2D strategy is to divide and demoralize. Right? I mean, that's what they're effectively doing. And you know, I don't even need to talk about how they're dividing. Right? So I'll go back before I get into this part of it, because some of you have not heard this spiel. If you have heard it, it never hurts to have a refresher. But, you know, one of the people that we talk about, their work, his work is just sort of fundamental to a lot of the things that we do and the way that we look at organizing and process. And that is a man named Gene Sharp. Now, I'm not going to go into Gene's entire history. Those of you who participate in the TEXIT blueprint or have watched the video of it online, you've seen clips from a documentary about Gene Sharp. But one of the things we talk about in leadership training, I try to talk about as often as I can because we have to know these things. But there's a term that Gene Sharp coined called atomization. And effectively, because Sharp wrote primarily on how to utilize nonviolent tactics to overcome totalitarian autocratic regimes, right? So that's kind of just setting the context here, okay? But he talked about atomization being one of the tools that autocratic and totalitarian regimes use to keep any coherent, real opposition from challenging the regime's power, okay? And so what they do and how they implement this process of atomization is they fragment us. Their job is to shatter society, okay? Because that's how they stay in control. And how they shatter society is they divide. They look for mechanisms and ways to divide us from one another. You know, we can see it in play all the time. The federal government utilizes atomization. Just literally, that's kind of the way that they operate. You know, when you think about how they divide us by race, by socioeconomic class, by religion, by, you know, political views. And so this is, so I say that because atomization is the tactic that the political establishment in Austin is using right now to divide. Look at the school choice issue. The school choice issue. And if you want to know why I'm using the air quotes, you can go back and watch my interview with Alan West, where it was very clear that everything that school choice was sort of a catch-all term, and the question was not, you know, was really people are debating school choice when they should have been debating the contents and the merits of the actual bill that was before, and really figuring out whether it fit that definition. But if you came out with a criticism of that bill, you were accused of being against school choice. And so, you know, that's again right out of the Rules for Radicals, the Saul Alinsky playbook. But that's just one example. And so you have all sorts of mechanisms that are happening throughout the legislative session that are really tooled by the political establishment to divide the base that could challenge them in the next election cycle. Look, they're already working the next election cycle. They're doing it through their legislative actions. And so, you know, they're looking for wedge issues. They're looking for bills that they could advance, amendments they could attach that will effectively split and divide their potential opposition moving into the next election cycle. So that's the 1D. The second D is demoralize. They want to divide and they want to demoralize. So not only is their legislative strategy about these wedge issues that are going to divide their potential opposition, right? Where, and I'll tell you, sometimes it's good things, right? So they'll put a piece of legislation up there that divides because some people are still looking at them as being the guys who have done the bad things, and they'll say, well, wait a minute, they passed this good piece of legislation. So not going to dwell on divide, but demoralize. So they're passing legislation that is, I believe, intentionally outrageous. I mean, I think that that's really and truly what a lot of this legislation is. Dave Phelan's meme bill. I mean, they're already investigating the guy, not over the meme bill, but for just like potentially taping memes on Dave Phelan's door, right? You're not supposed to do that in the Capitol, but it just has become this thing where people are like, I mean, they're looking, it's outrageous. Or this bill that what's the guy's name from out there in West Texas? I can't think of his name because every time I see him, he reminds me of someone else, and that's all I think of is that name. Darby, it's Drew Darby. But Drew Darby's piece of legislation about completely reshuffling how campaign and PAC treasurers can be chosen, what those qualifications are, and how you can only serve as a PAC treasurer or a campaign treasurer. You can only do it for one campaign or one. I mean, just outrageous stuff like, okay, let's just take a look at this one, right? Here's a good one for you. HB 1904, right? So HB 1904, outrageous piece of legislation. Why is it outrageous? Well, it's outrageous because it is an attempt to solve a problem that can somewhat legitimately exist, utilizing the federal government's mentality of one size fits none, right? So if you haven't heard about HB 1904, let me clue you in. The purpose of the bill is to regulate balloon releases. Okay, so ag people, right? People that are raising livestock, they've got a legitimate complaint about these people that go out and try to reenact a scene from Up for their gender reveal or whatever kind of, craziness that they're doing. And so they got to release like 30,000 balloons or some crazy stuff like that, right? And those things, they float, they pop, they kill cattle, they harm livestock, whatever it is. Okay. So we got maybe a legitimate issue that needs to be solved. So here's what they do. They decide that they're going to regulate. Now think about this. In Austin, they're going to regulate balloons. I'm sorry. So essentially, let me read this to you. The bill defines balloon as a bag made of materials like rubber or mylar and makes it a crime to release such balloons outside. So here you go. If let's say you go someplace and you get a helium balloon for your child or your grandchild, and they just, you're walking down the sidewalk or whatever, and they just happen to let it go. Congratulations. You just earned a Class C misdemeanor. You get a ticket. You could get a ticket for a fine of up to $500. $500. Little Johnny or little Susie accidentally let go of that string. You get to be on the hook for potentially up to $500. Now, if it's more balloons than that, right? Let's say you are one of those people that feel like you need to do a gender reveal and maybe the gun store's all out of tannerite, right? If the weight of the balloons is over 5 pounds, but less than 500 pounds, or the volume is greater than 5 gallons, but less than 100 cubic feet, I mean, this is what we're talking about, regulating balloons, then it's a Class B misdemeanor with up to 180 days in jail and a fine of up to $2,000. Congratulations for your balloon release. Maybe you're, whatever it is, maybe you don't maybe you're not on the hot list and understand what's going on with these, but you decide to do a balloon release at your wedding or your party or whatever it is. congratulations, you could get up to 6 months in jail and a $2,000 fine. And it just goes up from there. I mean, it literally escalates the balloon issue to a state jail felony. 180 days to 2 years in jail and a fine of up to $10,000. And here's the deal. You say, you know what, I don't ever do. I mean, when am I ever going to release more than 1,000 pounds of balloons? That's true. But what happens is, if you get a ticket, little Johnny or little Susie releases the balloon, and then little Johnny and you get a ticket, and little Johnny and little Susie do it again, guess what? You're a repeat offender. And you start escalating up the scale, right? With a minimum of for repeat offenders, a minimum of 180 days confinement for the Class A misdemeanors. And the courts can require up to 60 hours of community service, such as litter pickup or work at a recycling facility. So, demoralize, outrageous, just jamming your face in it. And then we've got this piece of legislation. It may still be, they may be debating it in the Senate right now. I don't know. About the foreign ownership of land, right? So land ownership in Texas by foreign adversaries. And I'm not going to go into the background of this topic and why it's an important piece of legislation. But lo and behold, what happens is they kick it back over and they make an amendment to the thing. I think it was an SB 17. Somebody let me know in the chat. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but so they've got this bill, and everybody's like, hey, this is a great bill, right? It's going to ban land ownership by foreign adversaries, which is going to prevent the PLA through their fronts from setting up strategic farmland near military facilities and key infrastructure, something that's needed to be done for a long time. They get this bill over, it's got an amendment on it, and the language has changed, and all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't sell to them, but 99-year leases are okay. 99-year leases are okay, right? Can't sell it to them outright, but you could just go ahead and lease it to them for 99 years. Well, I mean, look, if you wanted to make this any more like about China, then pick a number that doesn't sound terribly like the number of years that they had that the UK had a lease for Hong Kong, right? But anyway, I mean, it's just, outrageous. And so I say all this to essentially say that, they want to demoralize you. And look, I've seen too many people succumb to this. They feed into, or they accept the division without recognizing it for what it is coming from an outside force. And then they allow this kind of stuff to demoralize them. I mean, and it can be. This stuff is nuts. The stuff they are shoving down the pike, the fact that they're effectively refusing to deliver on any of the Republican, platform priorities. I've literally heard people say, I'm not going to vote it again. Why vote? Why vote R if I'm going to get this? Well, because if you take that mentality, you're going to get more of the same. It's going to be worse. Right? It's not even going to be more of the same. It's just going to be worse. I'm not telling you vote Republican. I'm not telling you vote Democrat. I'm not telling you vote Libertarian. I'm just telling you that you've got to recognize what they are doing is meant to break your spirit, to demoralize you, to divide and demoralize. That is their plan, because if people come out of this session fired up and put all this petty division nonsense to the side and come unified, there's not going to be any way that they're going to withstand the next primaries. It's just not going to happen. I mean, people are furious, right? And like I said last week, it's like, it's not just the Texas House. You got to put a heap and help into this on the Texas Senate too. Texans want an end to the property tax. If they can't end it immediately, how about putting us on a path? Everyone is getting crushed. Everyone is getting crushed by property tax. If you're a renter, you're definitely getting crushed too, because the landlord is passing that down to your rent. So property taxes are crushing everyone. The people of Texas have said this is a priority for us. We want a path to end property taxes. And so the Senate gets it, says, I have heard you. Dan Patrick in the Senate, I have heard you. But the best I can do is limits on THC, and let's get rid of the Texas lottery. We got real issues here, people. And I don't think that any of these guys get a free pass. But I will tell you that if you allow them to divide us and demoralize us, they ain't not going to demoralize me. I mean, that's just, look, I'm in it to win it, right? But if you let them divide and demoralize and render you inert, then be prepared for this, because we're going to lose Texas. We're going to lose it. You're going, what I talked about last week is the future that you can expect. Well, transactional gold would be awesome for our people. It would be great for our economic sovereignty. It would be a massive economic boom for us. But we're going to have to get permission from the federal courts first. If you want more of that, then let them demoralize, let them divide, let them break your spirit. But I don't know about you, but I'm going to tell you what I do when we're attacked, when I'm attacked like that, is I fight back. It just makes me commit even harder. And it makes me a little prickly when there are people that decide they're going to go inert. I mean, how many times have I heard, well, I'm getting out of this politics thing. Buddy, you know what? Politics ain't getting out of you. They're going to wear you out. And I'm going to tell you something, for the people that are not paying attention to these issues, like some of these bills I talked about just now, and there's scads more. I mean, I'm not even going to call it the tip of the iceberg. It is the tip of 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 the iceberg. Okay. But when people that aren't normally wired in hear about these things. So tonight, while I was helping offload pallets of water, I had a conversation with a couple of folks. I mean, I just have met them recently. I'm not going to say their names because that's not appropriate for here. But they asked, one of them made a comment about the Texas legislature, because I think the last couple of times they talked to me, I'd made mention that I'd been, live streaming, or that we'd had people at the Capitol. So he made a passing comment, and I just said, you're probably not going to believe me when I tell you this, but they're going to pass a bill, perhaps, if the clock doesn't run out, that regulates balloons, helium balloons. And both of them looked at me like I was kind of crazy. And so I kind of went through it like I did for you guys here, maybe not in as much detail. And the one guy shook his head, and the other one looked at me and said, and that's in Florida, right? I said, no, that's here in Texas, right here. That's what we're dealing with. I would posit that they are probably paying and going to be paying a lot more attention to some of the things that are happening moving forward. But that just reinforces the reality that, this is not stuff they're talking about in wherever they're watching their news. If they're watching Fox News, they're getting a heaping helping of Washington, D.C. If they're watching CNN, they're getting a heaping helping of Washington. They're watching OAN or Real America's Voice, wherever it is, they're getting a heaping helping of federal. But I'm going to guarantee you that the vast majority of people don't know jack diddly squat about this 99-year lease thing. It's like, well, we can't sell foreign land to adversaries, but we sure could lease it to them. I mean, just think about how stupid that is, right? The vast majority of people are not going to know about the balloon thing till it's done, and on and on and on. So this is where it becomes important for us to speak up, stand up, do the things we got to do. Because the alternative is to just curl up in a fetal position and let them continue to beat the ever living crap out of you and your family and your neighbors and your friends and your kids or your grandkids. And I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in surrendering and let them just beat us to death. So overcome the atomization. Do not let them divide and do not let them demoralize. And we will be able to unseat more in the next election. All right. I got to get to some questions. But I just could not, let this go. I just couldn't let it go. This had to be said tonight. And you will have to admit that I was far less ranty tonight than I was last night because I'm trying to be a nice person. Okay. That little smile right there was creepy even to me. All right, let's get to some questions. Russell, he says, hi, Russell. He says, as always, just want to know which Texas legislators are preventing a free, open, and honest election. It might be easier to list the ones that were doing, might be a lot shorter to list the people that were actually the good ones, right? It's that whole thing is a mess. I mean, it's just, I cannot adequately articulate how fundamentally broken and dysfunctional the House is. But like I said, I believe it's by design. I believe divide, demoralize. I mean, I think that's what's happening. And so I think they doubled down on the dysfunction to promote both of those things, the division and demoralization of their potential opposition. Let me take some email ones. I see this one about Alberta in the chat. I'll get to that one here in a sec. Okay, that is not a question. Okay, but thank you for that. This is from Roger. Roger wants to know, he says, has Texas yet to receive restitution from the federal government for its border protection efforts during brain dead Biden's border breakdown? If not, are you aware of any Texas efforts to collect? Okay, now this is interesting because I did not read this ahead of time, but in a very interesting coincidence, I guess you'd call it, this was something that I was digging into on an unrelated matter, because I still, so let me just roll it back. So part of what we are doing, we obviously work on white papers and position papers, things that we need to do to be able to understand what a transition for Texas will look like toward independence. Okay, so that's all I'm going to get into with that. But one of the things that I have been after for quite some time is to try to research and get an all-in cost for Texas border security efforts, because although Operation Lone Star is here, that is not the sum total of it, right? And I will tell you that because things that are tagged to Operation Lone Star typically deal with the National Guard and the State Guard and actions from the DPS, these numbers are not really consolidated anywhere, nor do I believe that they're adequately or accurately identified. That being said, through the research, and this has been ongoing for like 2+ years, I've reached out to senators, House members over that time, and there is no firm definitive answer. It feels very much like dealing with the federal government. That being said, in the research, I seem to be able to account for about $11.4 billion. Okay. So my understanding is that Chip Roy is pursuing legislation in Congress to get Texas reimbursed that amount of money. We know that when Biden was in office, that Abbott sent, a letter, communique, whatever you want to call it, asking for the reimbursement. I think there had been some official correspondence that direction, but to this point, right, to this day, even though you have had a change at the helm of the federal system, the reimbursement has not come. It hasn't. So Texans are still, even with Trump at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, we still had to pull $11.4 billion out of our own pockets to do something the federal government refused to do. And so I don't know that there is a proactive effort on the part of Texas. I think there was a resolution, perhaps, that was passed in the Texas House that was meant to be sent to the federal government saying that we should be reimbursed. I want to say that I saw that one talked about on the floor, just a resolution, so it went through. It's just typical, right? But, are we talking about serious, just any effort or serious efforts? Because some of these are, I don't think, serious efforts to collect. But definitely Washington, D.C. needs to make it right. Okay, here's one. Okay, yeah, this is a good one. Not that I'm saying that any of these others are bad. I'm just saying it's a really good question, right? So this is from Benjamin. He says, how will the Texas Sovereignty Act's claim that the union is overstepping its agreement with the states support our claim that Texas should leave the union? How do we go from one claim to the other? Our claim, the claim that Texas should leave the union is no different. What the Texas Sovereignty Act does is helps us continue to build the public case and the political pressure for why it should happen, right? Look, if it goes to a vote tomorrow, it wins. I mean, that's just the reality of it. We know it, they know it. And so they resist pressure to put it to a vote of the people. And, it's just what they do because they know what the outcome will be. But that being said, to that time, we have to continue to build pressure for the case for why Texas should be independent, should have this vote, right? So we right now believe that the phenomenal case is there. Look, we've got every reason. We have any reason that's on the books, right? Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution. The perpetuity of the union depends on the right of local self-government unimpaired to all the states. Our right of self-government has been impaired. So that's literally the only criteria that we need. But the thing about the Texas Sovereignty Act is, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I've done it, I think, the last several.
Sorry, I brewed hot water, so we have to make it come.
Oh, okay. Folks, I'd like to welcome you back to this edition of Late Night Hot Water Talk. Just kidding. Coffee's coming. Anyway, so I'm not going to go back through the entire TEXIT process, right, to explain how this is about moving Texas from status quo toward independence. But the Texas Sovereignty Act does play a really, I think, a crucial role. Could we do it without it? Sure. Does it help? Absolutely, right? Because essentially what it does is it creates a framework that makes the case for us, right? If we're saying the federal government stepping out of bounds, it's one thing. But if you've got an official governmental body saying that same thing, it has a bit different weight. And ultimately, we've got to put as much pressure as possible to make this thing happen. Do I hold out any hope it's going to put the federal government back in its box? Absolutely not. Zero. The federal government is not fixable, right? Zero hope that it will actually cause the federal government to have a reaction. But at the end of the day, what it does for us is gives us a government, a state of Texas government seal of approval on what we're saying. Because look, it's like I talked about before with Andy Hopper's bill, with the financial risk mitigation committee or whatever it was. But it's why that bill it was important as well, because it essentially puts the state government in a position where they have to effectively come alongside of us and reinforce and bolster what we say in the path forward. You know, it's one thing if Daniel Miller gets on YouTube and says, here are the reasons, look, the federal government is broken. They've broken the contract between the states and the federal system. We should leave, and here are the reasons. It's a very different thing when that comes with a state of Texas seal at the top of it, right? Very, very different thing. Not that you can't do it without that, but again, to your point, does it help? Absolutely, it helps, right? And it's not that we're going from one claim to the other. Our claim is the same. They're just catching up, right? They're behind us. But what they're doing is they're helping us. So it's just, you know, again, it's not going from one claim to the other. I mean, we haven't suddenly changed to the Texas let's fix Washington, D.C. movement. I mean, that's just not what that is. But our claim is simple. I mean, look, if you want to talk about why we need to be independent, it's not just grievance based. We have a positive case for independence. But the grievances and the reinforcement of those grievances does not hurt us in the least. So hope that answers your question there, Benjamin. All right, let's see what we got over here. You know, I forgot to remind you guys, but let me tell you, these last two questions are going to carry this thing to the house because these are doozies. Yeah, let's do these. So let me get to the Alberta question. So the question is, what can Alberta learn from us and what can we learn from them? It's a great question. You know, I have been interviewed recently by reporters from a lot of different places. San Francisco Chronicle being one of them. I mean, it's just a lot. And to a person, every single one of them, they're not from Texas, these that I'm talking about. They look at what we have done and are doing here in Texas and are stunned and amazed, right? They're not just going to our website, taking our word for it. They're giving us what I refer to as the complimentary digital colonoscopy, right? They're backgrounding us. And you know, they look at what we did. It's kind of like when Dr. Quartrip was here and he was doing sort of the same thing. You know, when it comes down to it, we're doing the right things. Sure, some things we could do better. A lot of things that we could do better are really because of a lack of resources and manpower. Okay. When you send me emails and go, how come we're not posting on social media as much? It's like resources and manpower. If I don't have the manpower and I don't have the resources to get manpower, then, you know, you have to let some things go. And that's just the reality of it. But, you know, and so I have also been surprised at the ones that have come to us, these reporters, and said that as they have interviewed others in some of these other independence movements, that they look to us as an example. Even ones that haven't reached out to us, ones that we have no dialogue with. And I will tell you, that is a that is a humbling thing, because if you were to look in November of 2005, when we started the TNM, we knew Texas would be independent. I mean, that's how committed we were when we founded the TNM. But boy, it was really hard to see. You know, it was really, really hard to see. About a half dozen of us. And you know, you got a plan, you got a path forward, you understand these things, you know that it's not a short game. It's probably going to be a long game. But you just so hard to see. And so to hear that is really humbling, and it's a tremendous responsibility. And so, you know, I say all that as a setup to your question about what can Alberta learn from us. I don't know. because every independence movement is essentially different, right? There are cores. Hey, thank you. You know, there are core threads that run through all of them. But you know, Alberta's a fast tracker right now. Look, they've been grinding. Alberta's been grinding at it for a long time, and part of what kept Alberta from being farther ahead. Honestly, I thought Alberta would make it out of Canada before we made it out of the U.S. Okay, but what kept them, oddly, is what kept it was these two things right here that I talked about at the very beginning: division and demoralization. Right? You know, I can remember a time where we could not find. We knew that there were multiple groups, and I say multiple. Okay. But we could not find a real. There were times, and that's not now, right? But in the past, where we could not find sort of engaged, credible organizations to engage with. And so, you know, look, I'll be releasing a statement tomorrow offering our full support for Alberta. I know that we have not posted about it. There had been not a lot of news about it on the Texian Partisan, but that's because we're watching to see how they shake down. And I'm going to tell you that right now, Alberta has the greatest shot at independence that they've had in all of my time in working for Texas independence, all the way back to August 24th of 1996. This is the absolute best shot that they've got. But what will become problematic for them is the 51st state talk. That will make the situation problematic. Okay. But if they will focus on independence, and it looks like they are, right? You've got a coalition that is built over there now. You've got memorandums of understanding between key players, key organizations for advancing independence. Danielle Smith, the premier, has essentially lowered the threshold for petition signatures to put it to a referendum. The question is really going to be whether they're going to have enough time to put the infrastructure in place to overcome the onslaught that will come from the Canadian government to try to torpedo that referendum. And if they don't, then they have to overcome the lack of infrastructure and organization with what is essentially just a tsunami of anti-Canadian government sentiment and pro-independence sentiment. So they got to, you know, we talk about it all the time, is that, look, you want to be, if for those who believe that electronic voting machines are rigged, then the way that you overcome it is you flood the algorithm, right? You flood the zone so that the algorithm, even with an adjustment, if it adjusts it in a way that is not close to reality, then it's a tip that there's a problem. But that's a conversation for another time. But they got to flood the zone, right? And so that being said, you know, the second part of your question, what can we learn from them? Man, we learn so much from every one of these independence movements, every single one, everyone. I mean, look, let me see. Yeah, I actually flashed this on the screen before, which is weird because the next question is kind of about this. But here's a book on the 1995 Quebec referendum right here on my desk. Right, we learned stuff from these guys, all of them. Right, for those of you who don't know, and I've talked about this before, but the TNM, when it was founded in 2005, we had about a 2-year study ahead of that where we analyzed independence movements around the world, contemporaneous, historical. And we weren't looking for just winning strategies. We were looking for losing strategies. We were looking for tactics that fail. Because look, it's great to know the path through the landmines, but it's also great to know where the landmines are. And so, look, I find that we learn from all of them. And from that time at the formation of the TNM, it's one of the reasons that we have an active international engagement program. That's why we talk to these different independence movements in California, New Hampshire, and all these things. We make sure nothing in common but one thing, and that's the desire to be able to, to have self-government, to determine our future, right? That may be the thing that we share. And, it's our attempt to pay it forward. So, what they can learn from us, I don't know, but we're willing to help. And what can we learn from them? I don't know, but we're willing to learn. Thank you for the question. Let's get down to this one. Yeah, and this one, I said, this is so weird, right? You guys are everybody's on the same wavelength tonight. Do you think the TNM will ever become its own political party like how Scotland and Quebec's party is? It's a question that we get often. Not as often, but typically around like certain things that happen not here. People say we need to start our own political party. So it was, the Brexit party, right? Or SNP, like for the Scottish independence referendum. It's always this sort of, it comes and goes depending on what's happening, right? So I haven't talked about this in a while, haven't answered this question in a while, but now looks like a good time. So I will tell you, in that 2-year period before we started the TNM, one of the things that we looked at and evaluated was how we were going to be structured. Were we going to go the normal route, kind of being a advocacy organization, or do we want to be a political party, right? I mean, was there a better path to victory, to independence being victory, by being a political party? And so at the time, that required us to look at electoral realities, look at election law, both state and federal, look at kind of the way the electorate was baked here in Texas. And what you find is that by doing so, you sap the potential and the power. Texas is a duopoly. You can talk about it being redder than red, but it really is a duopoly. And that's the way it is in most federal politics, right? So it's federal level and state level. Essentially, the two primary major parties have baked in their lock. It's baked into the election code, right? Because they've essentially established barriers to entry for new parties that are so high that it effectively keeps them out of the running. And I know some people may look at, okay, what about S&P, or what about Brexit? When they had the Brexit party, when they had that big win in the European Parliament. Well, it took some time for them. The Scottish National Party didn't win it overnight. The Brexit Party, when they won all those seats in the European Parliament, it was like, guys, they use proportional representation for their voting, not first past the post. But latest poll numbers say that Reform UK looks like they're getting ready to crush the Labour Party and the Conservative Party to become the governing party. So in the next parliamentary elections, you could have a Nigel Farage as PM. I mean, that's just what could happen. But that was all predicated effectively on the collapse of both the Labour and the Conservative parties. Okay. So it's to see a complete flip like that, because it would literally, if those polling numbers are even remotely correct, it would essentially put Reform UK as the top party in Parliament, and the Liberal Democrats, who have always been the third party, kind of in the second position. So things like that do happen, but you can't count on them happening. You just have to be prepared for when they are. So that being said, we did talk about it. We did have the discussion, and it does periodically get reviewed. But the other part of that is that, and something the Republican Party is finding out, the Republican Party of Texas is finding out right now, is that those rules that you think, because you think the political parties are, essentially their own organizations, their own sort of, they have associational rights and all that. What you find out is that's not true. Effectively, at the point that all of their advantages were baked in, the state had control over them. And so it tells them how they have to organize. It tells them, the various things they have to do regarding how many precinct chairs they have, and how the composition of their executive committee is made up, and how they can operate. This is why you've got the big brouhaha coming about Rule 44 censure, which is putting the Republican Party of Texas on a collision course with a bunch of establishment politicians in the election code. It's all going to come to a head when the filing window opens up in November. It's going to happen. Okay. So that being said, what you find is that the way that you are forced to organize under the Texas election code does not make an organization nimble enough if it is opposed enough by the establishment. They don't have the ability to do the things they need to do, organize the way they need to, bootstrap the way that they may have to, right? So it is meant to keep minor parties at a disadvantage, so they are not able to do those things. And then you've got the composition of the electorate itself. It would take a major sea change here in Texas for people to break free from this sort of two-party mindset, because that is it. When a duopoly has resolved and established, you almost never can break it. What's happened in the UK is going to be historic. I mean, it's going to be historic. It happened before in the United States in federal politics, but those things are super rare. And so you have to look at it from the term with the resources that we have and the time frame that we want to do that. Is that where we want to pour our resources into to fight all of that? Or do we want to operate effectively like so a good example would be the UK Independence Party during the Brexit debates. That's a really good example. They had zero electoral success, never got, you got Farage in European Parliament, but I'm talking at home, right? UKIP never had a seat in the parliament at all, right? They did not. I think the only one they ever had was they flipped a member of the Conservative Party over to UKIP. Okay. And I don't think that guy won re-election. So effectively what you had was UKIP operate as a pressure group. If you're going to classify them, even though they were a political party, the work that they did, getting the word out with Farage in European Parliament, taking to the floor and talking trash. But the work that they did on the street was they operated effectively like a pressure group, and they drove David Cameron to call a referendum. I mean, they effectively forced him in that, and Cameron thought that he had it in the bag. And I know this because I spoke with someone not too long ago that was that had a seat at that table in that discussion. And the only reason he called for it was he thought there was no way in the world that the Brexiteers would win. And boy, was he wrong. So, do you think that the TNM will ever become its own political party? I don't know. I mean, who knows what the future brings? Maybe the landscape changes. Maybe a political party is formed and the TNM is still here, right? I mean, the TNM could go form a political party tomorrow and still have the TNM and have a political party. But it would take an extraordinary set of circumstances. And I'm going to tell you, one of the things that it would absolutely take is we would have to have a steady stream of donors. That's just the bottom line. And right now, we're doing what we can just to keep basic operations of the TNM running. So I'm just going to encourage all of you, whether you want us to have a political party or not, really and truly, we need your help right now. You can go to tnm.me/donate and make a contribution because, I said it earlier, resources and manpower. If we don't have the manpower and we don't have the resources to get manpower, then things go away. We are not able to do things that we need to do to advance Texas. And this is the critical time. So you got to want it. I cannot want it for you. You got to want it, and you got to get stuck in. If you're not a member, you got to go become a member. That's at least something. Go help there. If you could make a contribution today, a $5, $10, $25, whatever it is. But we have to raise significant amounts of money if we're going to do the things we need to do to prevent what I talked about happening at the very beginning of this podcast, happening in the Texas legislature, from happening in the next one. It's just the reality of it. So I would ask you to contribute for whatever amount you are sick of the dysfunction in Austin, because that's our next battle. That's the next battle. We cannot conceivably get our referendum until we give a nice big fat enema to our own capital city. And I'm here for it. Let's go make it happen, right? Okay, friends. Well, guess what? Parting is such sweet sorrow. Let me take this opportunity to thank our channel members here on YouTube. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we recently launched. This was a way that people can help support the production of content to be able to get information out like we're getting out tonight and produce more of it at scale, so we can tell more people about how stupid it is they want to ticket little Johnny and Susie for releasing a balloon, right? But we instituted channel memberships on YouTube because they offered it to us. And they actually are giving us a bonus for our first, I think it's first 100 or first 200, whatever it is. They're ponying up and actually throwing money into it as well. So I'd like to thank these people who stepped up. They were the early adopters, the innovators, so to speak. Ron Raffoon, Melinda Liu, Jasmine, Lee Jacobson, Larry Belk, and Netgear, which that is a brand of router and networking stuff. So if you've got the Netgear name for your YouTube handle, you are so doggone lucky. But anyway, thank you so much to these guys. And so make sure you do that. If you're on our YouTube channel, hit the membership button and it'll take you and tell you what you need to do. Additionally, look, if this is your first time here and we've said anything that resonates with you and you believe that Texas should be a self-governing independent nation, head over to tnm.me/vote and register your support today. Absolutely. We need you to register your support. Why? Because if we don't know who you are, how are we going to contact you? How are we going to communicate with you? So it's important that you do that. And I will tell you, the legislators watch the number on the front of our website. And when it starts scrolling like a slot machine, they get as nervous as a chihuahua crap in a peach pit. So make it spin, folks. Speaking of communication, no, not speaking of chihuahuas crapping peach pits, but of communication, look, if you're not hearing from us, it's probably not our fault. 90% of the time, it is not. It is because email service providers are spiking our emails into your spam folder, or we're getting deboosted by X, which I thought was a free speech platform. Or we're getting deboosted in the algorithm by Facebook, or any number of things, right? And look, we cannot conceivably call every single solitary person every time we do something. So we have to be able to communicate. And look, this is what the TNM app is for. Go to tnm.me/app, download the app. It's for registered supporters only, right? So you're going to want to do the thing that I told you to do beforehand. If you haven't done it yet, download the app, turn the notifications on. This is our way that we can communicate with you, and a way that you can communicate with us, and we won't be censored by big tech or some crazy neo-Marxist sitting over at the call center for whatever big tech giant doesn't like our post that day. So let's do that. Let's make this thing happen. Go download the app, tnm.me/app. Available for both Apple and Android. And as I mentioned, look, donate.tnm.me. Go make a contribution today. I know you get sick of me saying it. Guys, I never used to say it. I never used to ask for donations. Everybody in the organization, all the leadership said, man, you gotta ask people. And I said, I'm really apprehensive about that because it's not about money for me, right? And I don't get a paycheck. I don't get a paycheck. I have a business, and that's where I make my money, right? That's how I pay my bills and keep the lights on in the house. That's how I donate money to the TNM. I donated $250 day before yesterday, or yesterday, whichever. It all kind of runs together. But I donated $250 in addition to my membership and my normal contributions, right? So, I do that because we have to advance the mission. I'm not going to give you the spiel again, but I'm just saying this. I never used to ask. And now it seems like all I am doing is asking, but that's because too many people are demoralized and divided. And if they're demoralized and divided, then that means that people like us, because our expenses in the organization don't change, right? Whether you support TEXIT today and decide you don't support it tomorrow, that bill for the server is going to be exactly the same, right? The bill to maintain the email list is going to be exactly the same, whether you're on it or not, right? Whether you decide you've had enough or not, it's going to be there. So, go pitch in. Everyone should do their share. Do not make me break out the letter. I'm doing it on the next podcast, by the way. Okay, my friends, that is what I would call a wrap. So tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to I'm going to finish this coffee. I'm going to hop off here, finish off this coffee. But anyway, look, I want to thank you for your time here tonight. Really, thanks for letting me, vent on these. You guys said you wanted to see more of that. So I feel like I get an opportunity, a little space to have some conversation with you about some things that are going on and great, insightful questions tonight. Keep sending them, right? If you did not get your question in tonight, send it over to coffeetalk@thetnm.org in between the streams. I go in, check that box. And sometimes if we don't get to it, we'll get an article generated, get it on TEXIT Partisan, or maybe it's something that needs to be in the TEXIT FAQs, and we go put it on TEXITnow.org. So lots of different ways to do it. But anyway, great questions tonight. And thank you all very, very much. And so what I will do is I will leave you with the words that I leave you with every time we're together. They're not my words. They're the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now. And the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.